going to be consistent and do the same thing for you?
Well, there's been a double standard for a long time, it seems to me. But before I get into that, let me just say one thing. There is an election in 12 days in the state of Wyoming, and there is a good person, Harriet Hagman, running for office. If you all haven't helped her, we want to make sure that she wins that race.
By the way, Cpac has endorsed Harriet. We have sent checks to Harriet through our PAC. And boy, having another person who pushed for impeachment against Donald Trump go down would be sweet.
Yeah, to this committee though, I think the key point is we've caught this committee lying 8 different times. I mean, they lied about Bernie Kerrick's travels. They lied about Barry Loudermilk, a colleague of mine, giving a tour of the Capitol. They lied about Jenna Ellis's documents. They lied about Eric Hirschman writing the note. They lied about the Secret Service. We caught him lying about Pat Cipollone and corroborating the story about if they went to the White House, they'd be charged. He said he didn't say that. And then they lied about me twice. I forwarded a text message to the White House Chief of Staff, and they said that it came from me when I forwarded from a lawyer in town who was former Inspector General for Don Rumsfeld. And then they played a video clip of me. I was doing an interview, and they played a video clip. In the video clip, I said January 6th is the ultimate date of significance in a presidential contest because it's the last step. You know, you got the election, and the electoral college meets, and their certification. Then the last step is Congress certifying the electors. And they left out an important part of that clip because before I said January 6th is the most important date in the presidential contest. Before I said the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said January 6th is the ultimate date of significance. That sort of changes the context. So think about this. If we've caught him in 8 false statements without any access to the documents, without any ability to do the deposition, be in the deposition, see the transcripts, look at the evidence, if we've caught him in that many lies with that limited knowledge, imagine how many other false things they're telling the country. That is what is so wrong. There's a great scripture verse, Polly and I found this the other day. Proverbs 18:17, it says, the first to present his case seems right until another questions him. And it's like, that's the principle of cross-examination that we always have in any type of proceeding, any type of hearing, that unfortunately is not present with this January 6th.
The Bible also talks about bearing false witness, which is awfully important because if you have no truth, what do you have in government, right? And so back to this question of what do? You say there's an election in Wyoming. We still have to have a big red wave in November, but how are you thinking through this awesome responsibility you have? I think the investigations piece is the biggest piece. It's what you you immediately jump to it. We have always the previous years of, we should be careful, we don't want to do too much, we'll take baby steps, we'll do one thing at a time. And I remember people like John Dingell and Henry Waxman just flooding all their political opponents with a constant barrage of letters and inquiries. What is going to be Jim Jordan's approach?
We're going to, like I said, we're going to do it in the right way. You got to be aggressive if you're going to get to the truth. Back up a second. Think I always tell it this way. On September 29th, rights to the state against parents. 5 days later, October 4th, the Attorney General of the United States issues a memorandum which does exactly what the left-wing political organization asked him to do 5 days prior. He issues that memorandum to set up a dedicated line of threat communication, a snitch line, basically for reporting on parents who show up at school board meetings to advocate for the well-being of their child. 16 days after that, October 20th, the FBI sends out an email to agents all across the country, and that email says, use this threat tag designation, this EDU official, this designation, this threat tag, use that when you're investigating parents who've been reported on the snitch line that the memorandum set up. So think about it. September happens in 22 days. They're going after their political opponents, their political opposition. They moved at lightning speed, and we've since learned that prior to that initial letter on September 29th, the Biden White House and the Justice Department were already talking to the school board. The letter was simply the pretext. Now we got the excuse to do what we want to do, which is to go after our political opponents. That is not supposed to happen in our government, but unfortunately it is, and we have now had, Matt, we've had over a dozen whistleblowers come to our office, FBI agents coming to our office as whistleblowers. And understand, we're in the minority. There's not a whole lot we can do other than tell their story.
But they feel desperate.
Yeah, they're good agents, good rank and file agents doing the Lord's work, and they're sick of the political nature of the Justice Department, so they're coming to us so we can begin to tell their story. If we get the majority, we can do the subpoenas and get further information and make sure the country gets the truth and hopefully stop it.
The one thing Republicans believe in is cutting staff, not spending a lot of money on bureaucracy, but I really think when it comes to your committee in a new majority, you really got to have these killer lawyers, and you've really got to staff up. And I think one of your first challenges is to convince, the fellow members of your majority that this committee is going to need a lot of resources. And the second thing is you have all these subcommittees, but I don't know how you're going to choose between Fauci and vaccines, big tech censorship, not following voting election laws and not following voter ID. There's the laptop from hell. There's an open. I think the problem is there's a lot on your shoulders to try to adjudicate this, but it's going to be a big effort.
How we will do it, because it's not all going to go through.
So you got to spread it out a little.
Yeah, it's Oversight Committee, Ways and Means Committee, Armed Services Committee has to look at the exit debacle that was the exit from that. And I asked her a question. I asked her a simple first question, direct question. I said, Dr. Birx, when the Biden administration told us that the vaccinated couldn't get the virus, were they guessing or lying? And her response was amazing. She says, I don't know. And I said, so you're telling me our government could have been lying to we the people? She goes, well, I like to think they were hopeful. And I'm like, so it was a guess, a lie, or a hope? That's not how the government, you think about this whole, we had this, at Homeland Security, they were going to set up the Disinformation Governance Board. And I tell folks all the time.
I think they did set it up, but then they had to shut it down.
And we all talked about it, you guys talked about it. They shut it down, thank goodness. But the fact that they were doing it, it kind of begs the obvious question, who's the biggest purveyor of disinformation? It's the federal government, right? It's like the government. How many things are they telling? So that's scary when they want to tell us what's disinformation, when in fact they have. I always do the virus. Remember when Biden said he had a plan, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Biden said he would never impose a vaccine mandate, and he did. So much so the Supreme Court had to tell him it was unconstitutional. They told us that this didn't come from a lab. It wasn't gain-of-function research. It wasn't our tax dollars. Well, it sure looks like all those things are true. I mean, think about the origins. They said no, it didn't come from a lab. It was a bat to a pangolin to a hippopotamus to Joe Rogan, and then we all.
And then when you said it online, when you said it online, they shut you down. Flag your.
They would call you for this. They would say you're disinformation. They told us that the vaccinated couldn't get it. The vaccinated couldn't transmit it. They said it was first no mask, then one mask, then two masks, then one mask, then no mask, then two. And it's like, which is it?
Where do you have to put your mask for this monkeypox thing? I'm a little worried about this.
I mean, the point is, we all knew the virus was serious, but be honest with us. And then don't turn around and say that the people are having disinformation when in fact it's the government that's proven time and time again.
Okay, so what you're telling us is that you guys are plotting and planning. You know the big job you have ahead of you. You know investigations are the number one thing. Let's talk about what I think is the number two thing. Senate Republicans have really done a number on House speakers because Senate Republicans are not willing to stand up and fight on spending questions. So you always have this first budget vehicle that goes through, and it's a wrecking ball for House speakers because they try to negotiate with Senate Republicans and come up with something. Can we break this historic problem? And can House Republicans tell Senate Republicans, look, we're going to pick one big thing and maybe one or two little things like defund NPR. That'd be a nice one. Defund PBS. Little things, but a big thing. And I think you have a theory on this. What is that big thing that we ought to get around and say we're not going to give in on this?
The entire Republican conference will have to make a decision on that. I think it's probably either the border, because we all know that the chaos that now is our southern. We no longer have a border, and frankly, that is intentional. Biden administration is intentional. So
And that's no longer a Republican issue. It's affecting all these communities.
we talked about this earlier, we are a populist, because of President Trump, thank goodness, we are now a populist party rooted in conservative principle, which is frankly where we always should have been. So it's either the border or it's energy. Because energy is, when the price of energy goes up, that drives the price of everything else. That's why we got, the main reason why we got this 41-year high inflation rate. It's going to go to the Senate and shoot things. And we're going to say, okay, you want any kind of spending level that up there, then we got to get a good policy that actually does something good for the country on immigration, on our border security, I say, or on energy. I think that'll be a conference decision. We have to, our fiscal year ends September 30th. You can't wait till September 20th and start having a debate. And why it's appropriate to do this policy before we actually pass the appropriation.
Well, it just seems to me that that's our big thing that we have to decide. Look, this is like for all of us, for the conservative activists around the country, we have to be realistic. This is the first step towards regaining power, a big red wave in November. That doesn't get much accomplished unless we follow it 2 years later with an even bigger red wave. In that period of time, that year or so, less than a year, when that presidential race is coming out, we have to determine what we will fight like hell for in that first budget process. That could be fossil fuels, that could be building a pipeline at Keystone XL, that could be securing the border, that could be these major questions on elections. I still don't know if President Trump, you believe he's running. You've been saying that consistently throughout this whole period of time. I know he admires you, but I know he thinks of you, appreciates the fact that you have stood up against all these lies against him, and we appreciate the fact so much that you speak for all of us when you do that. A speech, but then he kind of goes off the script, right? Isn't that the best part?
Oh, I love that.
Why is everyone telling you to stay on the script? I like the off-road vehicle version of Trump. I don't know.
I like his energy, his charisma. I love the fact that he loves the country. He loves our law enforcement. Loves our veterans, our military. Most important, and you all know it. When he speaks, he always lets the audience know, and the audience always understands this, that he's fighting for them.
Yeah.
And he said this is a great line, and it's so true. He says, the reason they come after me so hard is because I'm fighting for you. And that is exactly the truth. It's why he was such an effective president. Wow, what do you want to get here? Donald Trump